The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Time to rev it up again, another week. It's the show that always gives you a lot of my perceptions on things without telling you what to think. I want you to think for yourself, and that's why we're here for another edition of Everything You Need to Know. Kip Kiefer on the TKR network. Delighted to be with you in this fast-moving, dizzying, really kind of environment that we're living in now. We saw a lot of remarkable things this past week, including President Trump, his joint address to Congress. We were with you last Monday. That, of course, took place the following day on Tuesday night. And don't have a lot of things to share with you. I think it spoke for itself. The Democrats came in and acted like a bunch of spoiled brat clowns. Congressman Al Green from Texas was vocal in the back of the peanut gallery, disrupting the speech. Became the first member of Congress ever discharged from the chamber in a State of the Union type address, with the President of the United States addressing a joint session of Congress. So that was embarrassing enough, but they're holding up stupid signs on paddles. It was amateur hour. It was ridiculous. It was embarrassing. People were recognized in the gallery. Trump and his team did a remarkable job of introducing exemplary Americans or people that have suffered great tragedy or loss to introduce different aspects of that speech. And it included, of course, the mothers of murder victims by illegal migrants in this country, both the young lady from Texas, whose daughter's name was Jocelyn Mungary, and, of course, Laken Riley's mother and sister, the beautiful young woman who was senselessly beaten to death with a rock while she was jogging on the campus of the University of Georgia. The Democrats sat on their hands, did not recognize these people. The young 13-year-old boy who's had like 11 different brain surgeries for contracting brain cancer, there with his dad up in the gallery, a young man from the same district that Al Green, who's disrupting the meeting, represents. And this young African-American young man has been so brave and endured so much in his short 13 years with all the brain surgeries, and still he's persevering and fighting. And his dream is to grow up and become a law enforcement officer. And it was really a touching moment when President Trump sent the new director of the Secret Service up to the box and presented him with a badge and a credential that made him, this young man, DJ Daniel from Texas, an honorary member of the Secret Service. And it didn't move any motion at all. Trump said, and looked right at the Democrats and said it, you know what? I know for a fact that nothing I say here, nothing I do here, if I announce tonight that I personally have concocted a cure for cancer and all the other worst diseases in the world, or have reached a way to achieve lasting world peace, you wouldn't react. You would be against it because it was something that my administration or me personally came up with. So I understand you're going to sit there with these sour looks on your faces all night long because you're resisting right now the will of the American people. A sweeping election win, both houses of Congress occupied and now controlled by Republicans, and the Democrats' response is to resist at every turn anything good that is happening in this country, because They are not for the country. They are not in any way, shape, or form in interest of anything that's going to benefit their constituents. Their role in Washington is to protect their turf, protect their ability to have power and control, which equates to what I always preach on this program. It equates to bottom line proceeds. It's money. It's money, money, money that runs the show in Washington. I've told you for the last couple weeks, take a trip to Washington, drive around, see one unbelievable gated community after another in Washington and Metro Maryland and in Northern Virginia, these massive, ultra modern, state-of-the-art high-rise apartment buildings where all of these bureaucrats in Washington live because the money is flowing like crazy, and it's my money and your money and Tony Curry's money, and everybody who gets a paycheck and looks down and sees about a third of that each week is taken away because it goes to the biggest growth enterprise business ever devised, the American federal government. All of the hoopla now, all of the Elon Musk vitriol. This guy was a hero to the left not 5, 6 years ago when he was developing electric cars and coming up with all kinds of innovative ideas. Now he is the absolute bad guy from a Marvel comic. Evil Elon Musk is stealing, as Maxine Waters put it, he's stealing our money because that's the way they look at it. All the bureaucracy, and that is what's under attack right now in Washington with the Trump administration and DOGE, the Elon Musk initiative to identify fraud, waste, and abuse. I've added, of course, the extra T to that, which is theft, because that's what's happening to a lot of these proceeds, outright theft. When Stacey Abrams, a failed politician in Georgia who has been very loyal to the Democrat Party, is given a $2 billion with a B. Think about it, $2 billion. They start this fake climate thing called Climate Watch. It's got $100 in their bank account just to have a bank account to prove legitimacy. But it's been shown that the balance was $100. The last week of the Biden administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, who had gotten a shitload of money from the bill of the American Infrastructure over $1 trillion bill that was passed in Congress, a Democrat Congress, in the Biden administration, they were still sitting on a lot of that money, didn't spend a quarter of it on infrastructure. Instead, they cut loose $20 billion the final 5 days of the administration to all kinds of special interests, including Stacey Abrams and the Climate Watch organization, which knows nothing about climate, is only a shell for money to be transferred. And Stacey Abrams came out this week and said, my understanding was that $2 billion was to be used to people that have been adversely affected by climate change, to build new homes and to pay mortgages for people that have been disaffected by climate change. Now, that would be an interesting thing to track if it had come to fruition. If Stacey Abrams had collected her $2 billion and started building homes for people, quote, disaffected by climate change, how many of those do you suppose would be family members, financial supporters, and the like that are in her realm? She could argue that they had fruit trees in the backyard of their previous home that the excessive heat last year killed. So we need to buy and build them a whole new home. This is the theft I'm talking about. This justification of spending your money and just callously wasting it. $2 billion to Stacey Abrams' Climate Watch. Stacey Abrams knows nothing about climate except perhaps whether to how to dress on a hot or cold day. That is the level of her expertise on climate change. And it's so stupid that our system is allowing this, and the Democrats are so up in arms because this bureaucracy they've built, this merry-go-round of money that is being spent all over the country and all over the world to people that have these left progressive causes, which really only circles then back to Washington, because you can bet your bottom of that $2 billion, maybe just a paltry, 100 or 200 million of it, is going to be coming back to Democrat and progressive candidates in the next election. Climate Watch would become a big, big donor to Democrat causes and Democrat campaigns. And that's where the money gets funneled into the pockets of it goes all the way back to the source. The legislators themselves that vote for these allocations of this giant amount of money to the EPA and all these other 400 plus bureaucracies in Washington that now Musk and his cohorts are taking a hard look at and trying to figure out where all of the trillions of dollars that go to Washington from taxpayers every year. Why are we $36 trillion in debt? Because we are pissing away, wasting billions and billions of dollars on this kind of nonsense. And it continues and it never stops. And the bureaucracy I'm talking about in Washington never changes, because while the Congress, the House of Representatives, and the Senate and the executive branch, the White House, will change hands party-wise from time to time, what the Democrats have meticulously built over the last 25 years, starting in the Bill Clinton administration, going into warp speed during Barack Obama's 3 terms, because don't kid yourself, the Joe Biden term was really Barack Obama's 3rd term as president. He may have been 3.5 miles away at his headquarters at his mansion in Washington. He didn't walk away empty-handed from his stint either, but he was completely surrounding Biden with all Obama cabinet officials who completely screwed up the American foreign policy, totally political hacks in all major departments, mostly Ivy League lawyers who don't know shit from Shinola about how to run a business and how to run a country, and certainly not how to manage diplomacy. These are the same people that were urging Israel to reach a peace accord, have a ceasefire after Hamas, a terrorist organization whose goal is to eradicate Israel and Jews from the face of the earth, had the raid on October 7th, killing over 1,000 Israelis and taking hundreds hostage. And this administration, the audacity to ask the most sophisticated country in the world in counterintelligence and really the perseverance of their race and their country, to ask them to stand back and let this happen without repercussions and allow this terrorist organization to exist on the border in peaceful harmony, which is not peaceful, because these people were never going to stop. Hamas's stated goal is to wipe Israel from the face of the earth, to drive them from the Jordan River to the Dead Sea. That's what their intent is, and that is what they would continue to do. Israel had to go full bore and eliminate them, and now it's still being interfered with because they took hostages. They have slowly released some of them in terrible condition. The saga continues, but it's just one example of how the Biden administration also put Russia and Iran back in the international game by allowing them to benefit and profit just unimaginably significantly by the sale and export of their fuels. And that has put Russia in a position to be aggressive in Ukraine. It has put Iran back in business to finance Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and other terrorist organizations around the world, and also have at fruition and right now at readiness their nuclear program, which is a nightmare for the rest of the world. So, the worst administration in the history of our country has been swept away by the wisdom of the American people, and the Democrats continue to resist. They're resisting the will of the American people. They're ignoring the fact that the game is up. Everybody has found out exactly where the money's going. They're panicking. This is their pipeline. This is their road to maintaining power and control and untold riches for each one of them personally. And they are freaking out like the bad behavior they showed last Tuesday at President Trump's very inspiring address. Britt Hume, a veteran newsman on Fox News who had been with ABC or CBS, I can't remember which one, for years and years before that. Britt Hume has covered now, by his recollection, about 50 years of these situations. Britt's approaching 80. He is not a die-hard conservative. He is a middle of the road kind of um, traditional journalist back when getting the story, getting both sides, having a balanced opinion of things, not making judgments, reporting the news, and leaving it to others to form their opinions. Britt Hume said it was the longest and most partisan speech in this manner in this chamber I've ever witnessed, but he said it was also probably the most effective. So, in one breath, he said Trump rambled on too long and it was too partisan. But on the other hand, he recognized how effective it was to deliver the message that it's time for sweeping change in our country. So, let's talk about the Democrats. And again, I always have to add here, do not stamp me as a Republican. I am not a Republican. I am conservative. I believe in the Constitution of the United States. I believe in the founding principles that this country was born on. I believe in American exceptionalism when you understand what that term means. It doesn't mean America's superior. It doesn't mean America's better than other people. It means that Americans maintain a higher standard. Exceptionalism comes from, and I've talked about this before, from John Winthrop, who was a pastor on his way over on a boat from England on some of the initial voyages to the New World, the Americas. And John Winthrop delivered a famous sermon where he said, when we get to this new place, we need to have the highest standard, set the bar to the utmost level. America needs to be exceptional. It needs to be the shining city on the hill. It needs to be all eyes cast upon it. It needs to be the inspiring place that everybody on earth can look to for righteousness and lawlessness and law and order and the whole American dream concept was born from that. You remember the words in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The pursuit of happiness isn't going to, a club on Saturday night. They meant with pursuit of happiness Thomas Jefferson's words in the Declaration of Independence. Pursuit of happiness means always striving for the highest level of personal conduct, of doing the right thing, of living for others, of all of the things to inspire to achieve personally and collectively. Then our nation would have that kind of success of American exceptionalism. So that's the civics lesson tonight. But let me talk about another thing going back to that time. There was a very interesting situation in the election in the United States of 1804. And that was the election where Thomas Jefferson ran for president after the two terms of George Washington and the single term of John Adams. John Adams was running for reelection. Jefferson and Adams differed on every issue. It's kind of amazing. History is it's one of the things I find the most fascinating about it. Adams was kind of an old school, believed in more aspects of what they had fled, the monarchy, of a strong central federalist government. Sound familiar? Kind of like these contemporaries of this age, where Jefferson believed that the central government, the federal government, needed to just be a protector and a basically a organizer of the states, and the states should have the rights to run and legislate their own programs and control their own funding. He didn't believe Hamilton and Adams, two of the early leaders, believed that the federal government should be the source of all revenue, that the United States Bank should be the most powerful financial institution. And it was the efforts of Jefferson and others like them that said, we're trying to get away from a giant, all controlling, powerful government. And we find ourselves in that same position now. But in the election of 1804, Jefferson was running for president against Adams, who was running for reelection. And Jefferson really needed, at that time, New York was the most powerful state in terms of delegates, and that continued to be the case for many, many years, and still largely is a big factor today, because with the population of New York, the electoral votes from there, especially back in that period where there weren't hundreds and hundreds of electoral votes from 50 states, we only had the original 13 at that time. So when Jefferson ran for president, he had to do better in New York to hopefully negate some of the influence of John Adams, and it was critically important to make some inroads there. So Jefferson did not, and the guy that he chose as to run against in that particular primary, to get the nomination, and it was not a nomination process because we didn't have parties then. So I left that out. That's a big key part of this. We did not have nominations for president then. If you wanted to run, you just threw your hat in the ring. So a prominent New Yorker, a lawyer who had become very political active by the name of Aaron Burr, also ran for the nomination. And he and Jefferson did not see eye to eye. Nobody really saw eye to eye with him. He was identified properly as an opportunist, a guy just trying to make as much of a statement and an impact as possible. So the bottom line is, Burr and Jefferson both ran for president, and at the end of the day, both secured the same amount of electoral votes. They tied. And in those days, the situation was that the winner of the most electoral votes would be president, and whoever came in second, because once again, there was no parties. There was no Democrat, no Republican. Jefferson was more of a states' right guy. The other guys were more of a federalist kind of approach. Anyway, they tied. And the interesting thing was, and it wasn't Burr in this situation that was favored to be anybody's choice for president. But the way that was handled in those days was that the House of Representatives in Washington broke the tie with a polling of all the members of Congress, and there were strong feelings both ways. The most powerful man at the time, also a New York delegate in the House of Representatives, was Alexander Hamilton, who had been, of course, Secretary of Treasury under the George Washington administration. So when that vote was determined, it was a tough decision for Hamilton because he hated Aaron Burr. They were mortal enemies, and the story takes on a whole different complexion when I get to the end of it here. Anyway, the way that was unraveled was despite the fact that Hamilton had been a huge opponent to Thomas Jefferson his entire career. They were both on the original cabinet of George Washington. I found it amusing last week that the Democrats were trying to seize on apparently a pretty vocal disagreement between Elon Musk and Secretary of State Marco Rubio last week at a cabinet meeting where Trump just pretty much sat back and let those guys fight it out until he thought it had reached enough of a point where he stepped in and said, "Okay, that's enough. Let's go ahead and think about this, and we'll get it all sorted out." But this is not new because in the Washington administration, that happened all the time. Washington sat back and watched these guys go at it. The Hamilton contingent, basically, and Adams against Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and others. And so he had no love lost for either one of the guys who tied for first in the Electoral College. But because he thought Jefferson was far more the lesser of the two evils, Hamilton twisted arms and convinced people that that didn't like Jefferson to make him the new president of the United States instead of what a lot of people considered to be a real sleazy Aaron Burr. So that's what happened there. And there was a writer, I'm not sure what publications were around back then, but somebody wrote that politics certainly makes for some strange bedfellows. And that headline has permeated for many, many years. And that was making reference to the fact that Jefferson and Hamilton had been stern enemies and all the time in the formation of the country, yet Hamilton threw his support behind Jefferson in that situation. Well, now we've got the strangest of bedfellows in Washington, and the strange bedfellows these days are all under the giant tent called the Democrat Party, because you've got so many different elements, so many competing entities, so many people coming from different directions that naturally don't make any sense to be affiliated in the same political movement, which is largely, again, funded by the desire to continue to expand the federal government and to whatever tactic necessary. And really the engine for making that happen is the constant flow and distribution of money all along the channel, from the legislators themselves to all the people that are bankrolling them, the massive corporations. It is so laughable when you hear the Republicans just want to eliminate all these government programs so they can put money in the pocket of billionaires. This just in, folks, the billionaires are not on that team anymore. The billionaires have been on the big government movement machine, the pharmaceutical companies, the tech companies, especially the military complex companies who make billions and billions of dollars from wars being fought all over the world. That's why the Ukrainian situation drags on endlessly, because it's good business. And they are paying all of these politicians and all of these bureaucrats to keep all of that going. It's all about the money. So the strange bedfellows, when you consider that a part of this party is far, far left progressive, it's the Squad. It's this loudmouth, complete moron from Texas, Jasmine, whatever her last name is, who has been just chirping like crazy and accusing Trump of being a Russian agent again and dropping F-bombs right and left. These people can't do a press conference now without, cussing like a sailor. It is so unsavory. And I laugh at everybody who said, well, Trump isn't presidential and Trump is too critical and Trump is this and that. Trump is imperfect. I'm the first to admit it. But Trump has the right concept. Trump believes that the American people come first. Trump believes in the Constitution, and Trump is fighting the right fight, even if he's often annoying and alienates people. At least he's not standing up there dropping F bombs. He's not up there, completely going off the rails of all of this politics. And Jasmine Crockett, I had a senior moment there. I apologize. Is the congresswoman from Texas, along with Al Green, who is completely so anti-Trump. Like he said in the speech, it doesn't matter what he does, they're going to oppose it because it's bad for their business, and their business is making money and taking money and distributing money and having it come back to keep getting them elected. So bottom line, these strange bedfellows with this far left progressive movement that are in the streets and college campuses, walking around yelling, we are Hamas. If you are Hamas, you are a killer. You are a murderer. You are a terrorist. You support. Did you see the shameful thing a couple of weeks ago? A 4-year-old Israeli child and a 1.5-year, almost a 2-year-old Israeli child taken hostage, died in captivity with Hamas holding them for over a year. And when they released their remains, they paraded their tiny little coffins around the streets while Hamas people cheered. How sick, how twisted, how perverse is that? And yet we've got people on college campuses wearing masks, by the way, that don't even have the guts to let their faces be seen as they support a terrorist organization that's recognized by every major government in the world as just that. This is not a government. This is not a movement. This is a terrorist organization. And again, they exist to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. But this is the same party whose leadership includes Chuck Schumer. Chuck Schumer, the president of the Senate in recent years, now the minority leader. Chuck Schumer, Adam Schiff, now a senator from California. Talking about sleazy. He makes Aaron Burr look like Mr. Clean. Adam Schiff. And the big granddaddy of them all, George Soros, who has financed so much of the catastrophe, the chaos in this country, all of these liberal progressive DAs that just turn criminals loose. George Soros has bought the infrastructure of all kinds of states with his billions of really improper money that he made by shrewd financial moves that bankrupted millions of people. George Soros, Adam Schiff, Chuck Schumer, guess what they all have in common? They are all Jewish. And if you criticize any of them, you're called anti-Semitic. I wrote an article about George Soros and the evils that he wrought, and that he's an international enemy of the United States, staying in Canada for his own protection while he finances every nefarious thing, including Antifa, which was his deal, Black Lives Matter, all of these organizations that were in the streets protesting, burning things down, resulting in people losing their livelihoods and in some cases their lives. This is the guy who's bankrolled all of that. And criticizing him, the first comment I got on what used to be Twitter, now X, was, "You are a terrible, awful person criticizing George Soros. You're an anti-Semite." I am the farthest thing from an anti-Semite. I don't hate anybody. I have no vitriol for not a single person on the planet. I'll call out these terrorists, but personally, I that's not what I'm about, and not what people that I know are heavily involved in our movement to restore our country and our Constitution. It is not about hatred. It is about righteousness. It is about the shining city on the hill. That is the motivating factor. But How can a party under this big tent talk about strange bedfellows? These are leadership people that are in league, locking arms with the far left, which are supporting terrorist organizations that want to wipe their race, their religion off the face of the earth. It just doesn't make any sense. What about parents? Uh, are some of these people parents to small children? Do they really believe in the educators talking to their children about gender confusion and urging them to switch? Telling little girls that, well, if you really feel like a boy, we can call you different names, and we can start to get you to understand how you can become a boy through medical and surgery. And yet, if I don't care if I'm the most leftist parent on earth. If people are counseling my child that way and they don't have to tell me about it, which is the law in many states, that is absolutely unfathomable. If you're a parent, do you really want other people coaching your children, convincing your children that they are unhappy, that they're male or female, and trying to convince them that there are alternatives? And the evil entity behind that is the medical profession, these giant companies, because if they can mangle and completely mutilate young children and try to change them sexually with different blockers and actual removal of certain organs and functions, that these people will not only be patients for life because they're going to have aftercare for evermore, but they are also psychologically screwed up to the point where they're going to have medical, or I should say mental illness treatments the rest of their days. These just guarantee that the tens of thousands of people that have undergone this, and if this progressive movement had their way, this would have been in the millions of people, because this is what they want. And that's the motivating factor behind that. It's back to money. It's back to that same creating this crisis group that doesn't really exist as a way to raise money, funnel money, and generate money. And if you look at all of these different situations, the strangest of bedfellows possible are under this big tent called the Democrat Party, because I think it was in the mid teens, in the 20s here, maybe 2016, 2017, they had a G7 summit in Seattle, Washington. G7, of course, is the world economic meetings that the major countries of the world gather for. And they had so many protesters in Seattle. And one enterprising reporter went around and asked a lot of these different people and groups, what are you here protesting? And they got 11 different responses. Everything from climate change, which is another myth, to raise money and just like the Stacey Abrams climate watch we talked about. You had animal rights. You had people that were such hardcore environmentalists that they were and we talked about this on the show about a year ago, that their grand plan is to let human beings become extinct. Live your life, have a big time, but don't procreate, because we need we need human beings, period, on the planet to die out to save the planet, because the planet and human beings cannot peacefully coexist. Human beings are going to be the end of Mother Earth. And what's more important, Mother Earth surviving forever or the human race? You've got all of these whack jobs completely off the handle for all of their various causes and whatnot, and they're all under the same tent, and their intentions are completely different. And you've got the George Soros financed professional protesters that are there to turn any of these kind of things, including these campus situations now that are the product of academia. A lot of these professors are Jewish too. It's just unfathomable that this power and control completely takes precedent over any kind of principles or common sense. And this is what we're up against right now. And that's why they're freaking out, because guess what chokes off these movements and ends their power and control for good. You shut off the flow of money. That's the way to do it. And that's what Trump and Elon Musk and this all-star cabinet is doing. They're looking at where every dime is going, and every dollar that is leading to the destruction of this country is going to be targeted, because it's time to put that money back in the pockets of Americans instead of the government sucking it up like a giant vacuum and doling it out to all kinds of corners of the world, a lot of countries included, that they are financing the enemies of whoever America's supporting as far as our official government policy. It's got to stop. It's just a merry-go-round of money, and where it stops, everybody knows, in the pockets of all the people perpetrating it. That's this week's Need to Know. Hopefully it made you aware of some things that you are being deceived by others, because it's just common sense at the end of the day, folks. That's what I'm all about. That's what this movement is all about. It's Make America Great. And if anybody's opposed to America being great, I think that is a pretty good fundamental question to start with when you start looking at what's wrong with this situation. Have a great week, everybody. Continue to watch the never-ending show in our nation's capital. We'll see how it plays out, and get back with you next week with more that you need to know. I'm Kip Kiefer, wishing all of you a very great week. God bless you all.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.